Hey friend, welcome back to my kitchen. If you're new here, hi, my name is Jen. I do cooking and canning videos and sometimes I post garden content too. If that seems like the sort of thing that you'd be into, I hope you'll consider subscribing and sticking around. Today I'm going to show you how I make a cheesy Cajun pasta. This is a really fantastic meal and you can whip this up in right about 30 minutes if you're pressed for time. So this is a really good meal for those of you who have a pretty busy schedule and don't have all the time in the world to get dinner together. The hardest part of this meal is just chopping your veggies, so I highly recommend you do that before you get supper going, and then the rest will come together real quick. So for this, I'm going to be using smoked andouille sausage, just your regular old run-of-the-mill Cajun sausage. But even though I found this at Walmart, I know not all places have, regular access to specialty things. So you can substitute this andouille sausage for just regular kielbasa if you like. Any kind of smoked sausage will work. So I just recommend using whatever you have access to in your area. I'm just going to go ahead and cut my sausage links into little coins about 1/4 of an inch thick. And then I also have some boneless, skinless chicken breast here. Now you'll see my chicken breast is still a little frozen. I prefer to cut chicken breast this way. It's much easier. But I'm just going to cut my chicken breast into small cubes, like 1/2 inch to an inch. I want everything to kind of cook in the same amount of time. So I try to keep the pieces of meat as uniformly as possible, and I go ahead and trim off any yucky bits that are on this chicken while I'm dicing it up. And I didn't end up using that whole package of chicken breast. These were so big, I actually only used 2 of these. But I know most of you who know I have a big family probably expected me to use that whole package. I know where you were going with that, but no, I saved that for something else. If you're cooking for an average size family, I will leave all of the measurements down below in the description box because I always double or triple recipes. Normally I'm cooking for 6 adults, but on this night I was cooking for 7. So definitely don't go by what I'm doing here. Go by the measurements in the description box below unless you're cooking for a large family too. So once I get all my meat cut up and all of my veggies diced and ready to go, into a large pan, I'm going to add a couple tablespoons of some olive oil and I'm going to let that get nice and hot. And once it's up to temperature, then I'm just going to add my chicken and my sausage into this hot oil and we're going to cook these both at the same time. This is why I said try to cut your meat into uniform pieces so that it will all cook relatively quickly and one won't be done before the other. The next ingredient you're going to add to your meat is going to be some Cajun seasoning. Now, you can use store-bought Cajun seasoning. I make my own blend, and if you're interested in that, how I make my bulk Cajun seasoning, I will leave a recipe for that down below in the description box as well with the regular recipe. I like to make this up in advance and just keep it in my pantry. That way, I know what went into it and there's no fillers or weird stuff. So I'm going to add about a tablespoon or 2 of this Cajun seasoning to the meat while it cooks. Help get some really good flavor imparted into that chicken. Chicken breast is very plain and we want this dish to be spicy and zingy and have a lot of life to it. So I'm just going to let that meat go. And then while my meat is browning, I'm going to get another pan going for my pasta on the back burner. Always make sure you have your kitchen working for you, especially if you're doing dinner in a hurry. You want to have that pan of pasta water getting ready to go for you for when your meat is just about done. When my meat was, I'd say, about 3/4 the way done, I went ahead and dropped my pasta. Now I'm using penne. You can use whatever type of pasta you like. If you want to use elbow macaroni, that is perfectly acceptable. I say use what you have or what works for your household. If you stick around for a while, you'll find out I'm really not picky at all. It's mostly flying by the seat of my pants. So once my meat is completely cooked through, you want to make sure that chicken breast is cooked all the way through. I'm going to remove the meat to a separate bowl so that I can work on my vegetables and my sauce. So I've just added a pat of butter into my pan. I'm going to let that go ahead and melt down. And yes, there are still some meat drippings and stuff in that pan. That's perfectly okay. It is all going to end up in the sauce anyway. So I'm just letting this butter get kind of bubbly, melted into the bottom, and then I'm going to add that big bowl I have of chopped up bell peppers and onions. Now, I used 2 red bell peppers, 2 green bell peppers, and 1.5 white onions, but the smaller version of the recipe is 1 of each. So keep that in mind. Your pan won't look like this. Mine is way fuller than yours probably will look. So I'm going to let these saute in this butter, and I'm going to go ahead and add a few cloves of crushed garlic to this as well. And adjust your heat if you need to. You definitely don't want to burn your garlic or your onions, but I'm just going to let this pan go, kind of keeping an eye on it while my pasta cooks until my vegetables are cooked all the way through. Once your veggies are nice and soft and you can kind of see through the onions and you can smell the garlic really well, you're going to move on to the next step. And I'm going to add about 4 tablespoons of butter. Again, check the recipe if you're making a smaller batch. And I'm going to let this melt in, and then I'm going to add about the same amount of all-purpose flour to this, and I'm going to stir it around really well and let that flour absorb the butter and the juices from the meat that were in the pan and the juices from the vegetables, and just kind of cook out that raw flour taste. I'm not going for browning here. I just want to cook off kind of the edge of that flour a little bit, if you will. After a minute or so, I'm going to go ahead and add my heavy cream. Now, I'm going to add about half of it and then give it a really good stir so it can kind of incorporate with some of that flour. I don't want to burn my cream. I don't want to burn the flour either. So I'm kind of doing it in sections. And if your cream is nice and cold, you're not going to have to worry about any lumps in your cheese sauce. Now you'll see I did have a whisk over there on the side just in case I had some flour lumps rear their head. But I find that as long as you kind of add the cream in slowly and mix really well, even if there are any lumps in there, they're going to kind of work themselves out. So once my cream kind of comes up to temperature, then I'm going to go ahead and add some chicken stock to this as well. I guess you could probably use beef stock or vegetable stock if that's what you had on hand, but I had some chicken stock, so that's what I'm using. And this part is optional, but I highly recommend hitting your sauce with a little bit more of that Cajun seasoning. You can add as much as you like. If you don't want your dish to be too spicy, you can absolutely leave that out. Some of the seasoning is going to come off of the meat when you add the meat to the sauce. So in the meantime, we're just going to let this come up to temperature and simmer slowly. You don't want to crank the heat up too high. And when you think that your cream sauce is warm enough to melt your cheese, you're going to add your Parmesan cheese in segments just like you did the heavy cream. If you dump all of your Parmesan in at once, you're going to have a big mess on the bottom of your pan, and you take a chance of that cheese just scalding to the bottom of your pot. So just add a little bit at a time, slowly stirring until it's all melted together, and your sauce you'll start to notice will thicken up as you let it simmer. Now I'm going to add one more ingredient to this sauce, and that is some fresh parsley. I really like the brightness that it adds to the sauce, and if you don't have fresh parsley, don't panic. Use dried, and if you don't have dried parsley, you don't have to add it at all. It's totally optional. So if you have fresh parsley, throw a nice good handful into your sauce at this point. So after a couple of minutes and you can see your sauce visibly thickening up, like it starts to cling to the spoon a little better, go ahead and add all of your meat and all of the juice that has settled to the bottom of that bowl into your cream sauce. Now from this point, your sauce is going to thicken up really quickly, so definitely keep an eye on it and shut it off just shy of being, the perfect thickness. You want this to be still a little bit loose so that when you add it to your pasta, it can get down in the holes of your pasta and just make it extra delicious. So because I did this in 2 pans, I have a lot going on here. I'm going to add my cream sauce to my big pan of penne, and I will show you how I serve this. Now this would be absolutely fantastic with some garlic bread or something on the side, but I had company on this night and I was just trying to get dinner done and everybody fed, and so I skipped on the garlic bread, but if you have time, I definitely recommend making it. Now, as this pasta sits, this cream sauce is going to get thicker. As you can see here, it's starting to cling to the pasta and it has gone down inside of all of the noodles. So just be aware that it will thicken as it sits. I topped this with a little Parmesan, a little more of that Cajun seasoning, and then I hit this with some fresh parsley and we were ready to eat. Everybody in my family loved this pasta. It was so simple, like I said, 30 minutes and it was done and it fed a huge crowd of people. So I definitely hope that you give this recipe a try. And if you do, leave me a comment down below and let me know what your family thought about it. Did you change the recipe? Did you double the recipe to feed a large crowd? Or did you double the recipe so that you could have leftovers the next day? Until next time, friends, happy cooking.
You're giving me